Hey everybody, welcome back. Uh, I am Keith Jopling, a long-term colleague and friend of Music Ally and author of Body of Work. I am here with Richard Archer from the band Hardfi. Uh, Richard, thank you for joining us. Pleasure. We're going to be talking about the album in the digital age, the age of streaming and AI, or right now. Um, Richard, you are about to release a new album number 4,
Yeah.
Sweating Someone Else's Fever, after a gap of 15 years since
Yeah.
your last album. Uh, but I know Hardfi got back together after a hiatus, let's call it, in 2023. You've done a couple of short tours. You've done an EP late last year. Were you always headed towards making an album? Was that always the intention? When did it first come about?
I think it was a little bit sort of suck it and see. We'd been away for a long time. If I'm honest, when we kind of stopped working, we were fairly beaten up and bruised. We kind of felt like that no one really wanted to hear what we had to say anymore.
Yeah.
And so what basically happened was that in lockdown, I've been working on another project and actually had an album to release, and then lockdown came along and that kind of ended up on the shelf, and for trying to find something to do, I did a little live stream and I played the whole of our debut album, Stars of CCTV, which is what most people know us for. And the response to that really took me by surprise. It obviously seemed to mean a lot to a lot of people, and it was like really, the thing I take away from it was such a warm response.
Yeah.
There was a lot of love, and I was kind of almost genuinely taken aback by it. And it was like, well, maybe we should do something. So we just put a gig on and it sold out in 10 minutes. It's like, wow, that was great. That was so good. So it's kind of like there was never a fixed plan. It was just see what happened.
Yeah.
And I sometimes found, and when we were started talking about new music because we were just playing the old stuff. Well, let's do something new. I can't sometimes found the album thing. I think it's because really from our second album, it's quite a heavy weight. Our first album was a collection of songs that I'd written that at one point didn't seem to hang together at all. Better to better, I wrote as a song for a girl group in my head. I don't know what girl group it was, but and all these things. But when they came together, they all seemed to actually make sense. But it wasn't a plan; they just did.
Mm.
And I guess it was because I was just writing about my life at the time, and then suddenly, we'd only ever wanted to get in the NME and do some gigs, and we had a clause in our contract, if you sell 60,000 records you get to make another one, and that was what we were looking for. We didn't expect it to become what it did, and all of a sudden it was like, right, well, now you're here, you've got to compete with the Beyoncés of this world, you've got to be UT, you've got to make us, and you'll start kind of, it becomes like and this album it's a moment in time, it's your opus or whatever, and it becomes like quite a heavy weight.
Yeah.
And by the way, can you do it really quickly? Like, and it's sort of, in some ways I quite like the idea when we came back of going, hey, let's just do an EP, and then just be like a stream of consciousness. We'll just put this up at that, and but I think you mentioned it in your book actually, and I read it somewhere else, Jack Antonoff, it's like a single without an album is like a long corridor going nowhere. It is that. People still, they don't want to talk about what you're doing unless there is an album at the end of it.
Yeah. You can't really tour without an album. I know you guys did when you first came back together. It was to celebrate an anniversary.
Yeah.
But you can't really get booked on a tour without a new album, can you?
Yeah, people want to say what's coming next. They want to know what's happening. They're only going to book you if you've got some heat going on, something to talk about you. And the thing way I sort of approached it was a lot more. I'd read the Rick Rubin Creative Act book,
right?
And about just like kind of just, this is just a moment in time. This is your like a diary entry, and that was a lot more, spoke to me a lot more, because it's like, if you're sort of sitting there trying, I've got to make a classic album. Wow, I mean, how can I compete with you know, the greats. I just didn't think I could. So it's like, well, I just wanted to do a diary entry and then
Well, especially now, because in a way, I was going to ask you about this a little bit later, but since you mentioned classic album,
Mm.
I mean, so last year was the 20th anniversary of Stars on CCTV, which I think in my mind and everybody else's mind is a bona fide classic. Like, it's a bona fide
yeah.
British classic.
Yeah.
You couldn't really dispute it. You know, if you were firing up a barbecue that summer, the
Yeah.
soundtrack,
Yeah.
you know, was it number 2 or number 1?
It went to number 1 eventually.
Yeah.
In the following January.
Yeah, because it did have a lot, you know, it had a lasting effect.
Yeah.
And you know, a classic album now, I mean, what's your expectations and trepidations of releasing this album all these years later in a very different environment?
I mean, I'm excited about it. I don't know what to expect because there's a little bit of me that feels like you can, you know, if I was to sit here and break down the work that went into that record, and it can come out and then be gone. You know, it's like they're on to the next one a week later. You know, it's like, and in some ways, even with Stars of CCTV got to number 1, and then the Arctic Monkeys released their debut. It was like, oh no, it's sort of like,
you're in good company there.
Yeah,
and you were punching your weight.
Yeah, and also I am, you know, I think a lot of the time, you know, I'm very proud of that record. I think it's a good album, but also we were in a great time to come out as a band. There was British guitar music was having a renaissance. I've been in a band previously, me with my mates and my brother, and we'd signed to a major record label, got to work with Mick Jones of the Clash. He's like a hero.
Yeah.
But we were like it was sort of like a punk Northern Soul thing. It was kind of quite Dexys, really. But at the time, everyone was listening to French house and kind of, you know, middle of the road indie folk in sort of music, like Turin Breaks, that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
And we were just like, no one gave a monkeys because we were not where it was at. We were just doing something completely different. So then, you know, come around again, lucky enough to have another go. And we just suddenly we're putting a record out and there's Futureheads, Maximo Park, Subways, Kasabian, Kaiser Chiefs, you know,
New Wave,
off the back of Strokes originally, and then Libertines, Franz Ferdinand.
Yeah.
You know, I remember when the Strokes, because I loved that debut Strokes album. I remember when it came out, and the first album that we'd been dropped, and I was walking around Kingston actually, and I got the Strokes album. And I was like, oh, this is really great. And then there was the local territorial army were going through town trying to recruit. Oh, fuck it, I'll join the army. And I was too old. I was like, shit. You know, it was like, that's it.
That was on the downfall slide after being at the top of the music business, was it? Right.
And it was like, you know,
it's funny though, because the Strokes have got a new album out around about the same time as your new record.
Yeah.
You know, so it's amazing how it comes and goes. But I mean, I'd say congrats on the new album. I mean, I've played it a few times. I can see me continuing to play it. And that's saying something because, as you say, it's totally different now.
Yeah.
And you know, in the book I write about the evaporating album, it's almost like it doesn't matter how good it is or even who's released it.
Yeah.
Within 6 months, certainly it's gone. I mean, I feel like that's not a great environment for the amount of work that goes in to a record. So I'm on a mission in a way to remind people that of what goes into an album. Remember where it comes from, the provenance. That, you know, don't just pick this up and fire up a playlist and whatever and just expect it to be there. It's there. But I mean, just talk through a little bit about how much time this has taken, who's collaborated on it, how much effort has gone into making this new record.
Well, this record has kind of gone back to the beginning for us. So our debut album, we made it completely ourselves. To give you a little potted history, you know, I've been signed to a major record label, London Records. They got bought out by someone else. It all went down the pan.
Yeah.
And my dad had just died, and I was at home, and and I was just trying to find out what I wanted to do the rest of my life. And I basically ended up renting a little ex-cab office in an industrial unit near where we live, because it was cheaper to rehearse there a couple of times a week than go to Acton, which is the nearest rehearsal studio, in the rush hour traffic when everyone finished working. And by the time you got your gear set up, I had a cup of tea, let's take it all down again and go. So we rented this place. I had a stone staircase outside, concrete, not stone. Put a mic up there, and suddenly your drum kit sounded enormous. And as well as writing music, I love the recording technical side of it. And I bumped into another guy from round Staines where I live, who been in a band called Supermodel, who were like, again, he was very DIY. And he was a face because he'd been played on the radio,
Yeah.
And he came in and he took some of this stuff I've made and mixed it, and he made it sound incredible. Woolsey White, who's worked on all our albums since, and is a friend of mine. And on this new album, it's gone back to, basically we've still got that unit. It got really big for a bit, and then we had to give up some of it, and it's sort of like, but we've still got elements of it, and we recorded everything there. And basically, I record it and I mix it with Wolsey, and I sweep the floor and empty the bins and basically there's no one else. It's just me, basically. And the guys come in because they're all working, they do their bit, and then it's like, there is no
They're all working day jobs.
yeah. So and as it was 20 years ago, right? So also this place needs to be paid for, and you end up you can't multitask because maybe in a studio you have someone editing while you're doing this. You've got to do everything sequentially, so it takes a long time. And also you kind of have to find your own way, so everything takes longer because it's just you doing it. And it's an awful lot. It's a lot of work. It's a lot of trying out ideas. Some things don't, and sometimes it's really hard because you're in a room on your own, and you've kind of don't know if something's good or not. You start to lose. And
did you question why am I doing this?
Completely, because it's like I just don't, I've got kids now as well. I'm like not spending time with them, but it also is why was I doing it? It's because if I don't, I'm always writing songs, coming up with an idea or something, and you always kind of want to go, that's pretty good. It'd be great if someone else could hear that. So there's always this kind of weird need to create and make something. And it's also sometimes you end up with a load of half-finished ideas. Finishing stuff's really hard, and then you finally finish it, and then obviously then you play it to other people, and sometimes something you really like no one else gets. And it's just all that. It's that a lot of it's up here, and it's hard. And then you kind of, let's say you finally finish the songs, then the rest of it comes. It's like, okay, right, well, you've got to mix them, then you've got to get them mastered, and then you've got to sequence the album, and then you've got to balance the levels, and then you get that sounds really good, and then it's like, oh yeah, but we could really do the singing at the beginning. Oh, that's going to screw up our playlists. Okay, how can we accommodate you but still keep it feeling good? And then the artwork, and I enjoy it. That's the thing, you enjoy it, so you don't mind doing it, but it's a hell of a lot of work. And if you kind of worked out an hourly rate, it would be,
because time-wise, this has been how long in the calendar?
I mean, for me, it's this hard one to actually quantify, because some of the songs on this new album, they were bits and pieces that I had from earlier that I was always like, I love that riff, and so I'm going to take that. No, actually, what if I try it with this other song I had? So, like, for instance, I mean, this is one of the funny things that happened with this was like the first single off the album was a track called They Ain't Your Friends. And what happened with that one was I'd kind of, as far as I was concerned, finished the record, and I'd sent it off to our management company. It's good, sound great. And said, God, wouldn't it be great if there were one more hardwired band? Wouldn't it be great? Yeah, of course. I just plucked one out of thin air. Like I haven't been trying to come up with one for the last 15 years.
That's the thing that hasn't changed,
No.
right? I mean, people talk about the music industry being totally different from, 2011 when you put your last album out, but people still want the
Mhm.
singles and the bangers, more than ever.
And isn't the story of David Bowie, it's like, oh, we could do a track and he managed to just knock up Starman in like 10 minutes. And
Yeah,
you're like,
yeah.
but so so I'd given my old computer to my son, and there was a couple of old demos in there I'd forgotten about. And he took two of them and I put them together. He's 10, and gave them to me on an SD card. And it was like the key was the same, so that worked, but the tempos were different, so they sort of drifted in and out of time. But when they were in time, I was like, that sounds pretty cool.
Yeah.
And I sort of sat down with him, and we made this, literally just didn't even try and figure out an arrangement. It's just like, let's just run this out. That was pretty good. Sent it off. Everyone loved it. And that was a little bit of a lesson to me as well, because it's like sometimes you can beat yourself up about something. And actually, I think a lot of it, you've got to be, if you don't enjoy the process, don't do it, because the outcome, even let's say you had the best album ever and you put it out and Elvis comes back from the dead and releases a record. Do you know what I mean? Like, you just can't, you can't,
that's out of your control. Yeah. I mean, I think given what you've described, though, to me, the record sounds like a full-on production. Like it's eclectic sounding. It's got a big sound, very varied. You've got the Cumbia track you brought in there, but even the tracks that sound like Hard Fight are very varied. They're on a pretty varied scale to me. And you've got brass in there. You do a duet a couple of times with female voice who is
Kristen Cummins.
Yeah, those tracks are great.
Yeah.
There's a lot of variation in the record, which I really like. So, I mean, you can achieve that. Just the fact that you can achieve that working on your own, essentially, is pretty impressive to me.
I mean, I think so. Kristen, I'd worked with. So how did we know? So Kristen came over here. She's originally from sort of just on the border of New Jersey and Philadelphia. She came over here, and she was going to be Mimi in one of the early productions of Rent. And she was nominated. She was nominated for an Ivor Novello for that. And she kind of met some English guy and stayed over here. And I met her. She was kind of connected with Mick Jones. She'd done some singing with him. And then we had a TV show, and she came and did some backing vocals for us, and we got on really well. And in the sort of like after Hardfire, I'd got this other project going on called Offworld, which was basically letting her, because she's as well as a great singer, she's theatrical, and she stands on stage and you just want to look at her. She's incredible. And I'd got in with her and Wolsey, who I'd waited half her records. Dale Davis, had played bass with Amy Winehouse. A guy called Smiley Barnard, who brought Dale in. He had drums with everyone from Joe Strummer to Lily Allen, done loads of stuff. And we all got in, and it was very difficult because normally I can't the tunes at home, and then I take them to the band. And this one, we got in a room, and I said, I've got a couple of chords, and we'd jam it out. So for me, this was like a new thing. It was like, this is like finally getting that sort of duende moment where magic happens. And like, wow, this is, I get that on my own sometimes. You're sitting there going, oh, that's cool. Time just passes and you get all this sort of stuff. And so I've been working with her, and that was kind of like really, I think it was really eye-opening for me. And in fact, one of the tracks she features on, Rose Electric, she was about to go out to the States. I said, just have a go at this, will you? And she did it in one take and then went, and that's it. That's her singing on it. And I love that. I love the fact that it's, like the track that my son did. I love the fact that it's not, because I think in the past, sometimes we've been so desperate to make it as good as it can be, because it's everything, that you can sometimes kill something with love.
Overthink it.
Yeah. And in that kind of like, well, this is just, it's got to be this. You keep some of that craziness going,
How much did you think about the scheduling? Because like in your first 3 albums, it was still very much it was still the CD era in terms of the product. Obviously, digital had arrived, but the vinyl hadn't got that moment that it's got now. Do you think that makes the record special? Did you think about side 1, side 2, all that?
Yeah, I mean, but and one of the things about Stars of CCTV, it was like so it came out on vinyl, and the vinyl's great. If I say so myself, the cover looks great that size.
Yeah, yeah.
And it was a double album, so it's like two 12 inches with the album spread over two 12 inches.
Right.
So it sounded great as well. And it was the biggest selling Warner Brothers record. I think it outsold Madonna. But it was also the last, and what was sort of always bothered me, because that was all part of our culture, you know, we used to go out DJing on vinyl, and we'd, you know, that was the whole thing. And we loved having it on vinyl. We loved the 12-inch mixes and all that sort of stuff. And then on the second album, they didn't put it out on vinyl. Just as everyone started getting back into vinyl, it was like, it's kind of crazy they didn't do it. So that was kind of heartbreaking. But that, so, and we, and on Stars of CCTV, we really thought about, you know, what is the next track, first track on the last track of the album? What's the first track of side two? And even though, and on the new one, it was like trying to think in 3 dimensions in some way, because it was like, well, what just feels like a good flow? What's going to work on a streaming site? And also, you know, what's going to work on vinyl? Literally thinking about, you know, there was a point where, like, well, you want to do it this way, but then we're going to have a lot of information on side 2, which means that towards the end of the record, you're going to start losing quality. So all those sorts of considerations come into it. And that's because we've always come from that background. It was like, well, you want to be able to turn it over and there's a cracking song to start off side 2.
Yeah. And you get that kind of so the ballad comes in the middle of side 2, I think. There or thereabouts, so you get that kind of little break.
Yeah. There was a little bit of a compromise there where it was like, oh, look, we really need, you know, that was hard. You know, we want to have the singles at the beginning. Yeah. For streaming.
Yeah. Go
so,
with bang.
Well, can't we not have a streaming playlist and a different one for the album? Not really. All right. So that means, because there was, if I was to show you the, you know, mine and Wolsey, our running order is slightly different from the actual running order.
Okay.
So you have the thing, and you have to have a consideration towards other things.
Yeah.
But I think we made it work. We changed things around and got it to, and then it's down to like little things. Like, it's not just the running order. It's like the gap, you know, like how long from that one finishing to this one starting. And is there a slight, you know, do you want this one to be a little bit quieter, or, you know, like literally getting those
things matter more than you think.
Yeah.
Because I think that's one of the reasons why the album is still relevant, is those little details.
Yeah.
Is what gives you the experience and takes you on the journey that's so separate from the world of playlists or, you know, social media or whatever.
And that was like, we spent a long time on that, you know, and when we went to do the mastering, and we took down, Wolsey and I went, there was a guy mastered, as great, he's mastered all records called Dick Beethan down, he's in Hastings now, 360 mastering. And we took Ross, our guitarist, down, we sat in his room with these incredible speakers, and we sat there and we spent all day going, a little bit longer, literally fractions of a second until it just felt just right. And, you know, fully aware that most people probably won't care, but we care. So
yeah.
You know,
that's it. It's you don't quite know who is going to care about those things.
Yeah.
No, you feel it's less than it was back in 2005, but I'm not sure about that. I think that's one of the reasons why the art form has survived. It feels to me like there is a bit of a creative race going on with albums, which is extraordinary to me. It's like the amount of thinking that's going into an album. I was listening to the Ray album a couple of weeks ago. That's an amazing concept.
Yeah.
You know, new Thundercat album, same sort of thing. Your album, same sort of thing. It feels like, okay, these are, you know, a selection of 11 really, really good songs that's worth listening to start to finish and repeatedly. I mean, how much is it just a batch of the best songs you've got versus the concept, sweating other people's feet with the cover, all of that? How are you thinking about that as it's coming up for release? Because it's going to be released in June, I think.
Yeah. I mean, there is an element of, I think it went well for me anyway. And like I was saying to you earlier, you know, like sometimes the idea of a concept album, you know, you could argue Stars of CCTV as a concept album. It was not conceived as one. It was just writing songs that I felt resonated with me. And I guess that was the concept. It turned out that it was. But sometimes, though, it's just trying to survive. You're just trying to make the best stuff you can. And you just want to have the best songs on there. there's always an element of like, and this is where I think sometimes in the past we've gone, everyone needs to be a banger, everyone needs to be great. And actually, well, no, not everyone needs to be. Sometimes it's nice to have a moment to kind of reflect and kind of like, and there was a, I think there's a track on the album called Arise. And right towards the end, I was thinking about maybe that should come off because there's another version of that track, which is much more bombastic. And so I know this one, it works. It just works. Let it be that.
You've got endless choices, haven't you, to make?
But it's interesting, again, reading your book, about finding the time to listen to a record, because I was thinking about this and that, and this is the slight discrepancy with the spinal side, is that when I think about a lot of the time when I listen to music, it'd be in the car. So much that we would, certainly the first album, we would burn CDs and listen to it in the car. That was the one way where we could find if it was sounded right. And that would be the time where you had that 40 minutes to sit and actually listen to something, and just to throw that in the mix of your thing. It was like, that was actually the amount of music that I've actually being able to, when spending the time with it, would be in the car on CD.
And what about now? Do you make time to listen to albums now?
It's hard. I mean, I say I've heard the K-pop Demon Hunters album a lot more than I've heard stuff I've like to listen to. But there's some great tunes.
Not bad.
Yeah. I remember watching it like, what is all this then? And then there's a bit where they come in at the end and what's the song called? But she's talking about, and I was like that. And I go, I'm just a bit tired. Like tearing up. They were terrific. And she defeats demons. Terrific. Yeah. But I'd still find that if I listen to stuff on a streaming site, I put a record on and I listen to it.
Yeah.
And I don't know why. I find it really hard to sit and listen to an album on a streaming site. Whereas if I actually put an album on it, it's much more engaging.
Yeah, it's a different choice, isn't it? It's that it's self-imposed scarcity, I think is what it is. Because when you're on the phone, you're on the streaming app, it's all there, and it's a little bit anxiety inducing. Well, we don't have too long now.
Okay.
We've got a bunch of creators tuning in for this and artists. And you've chosen to make an album. We talked about it a little bit. It's obviously a risky move in this day and age. How much did it cost? Who pays? How are you going to make your money back? Are you worried about that, or are you more philosophical?
Well, obviously, I need to survive, so I would like to earn some money from it. But it's with us, so we rent our own studio, right? That costs 17 grand a year. Now, but which is when you're busy, it's affordable. When you're not, it's not affordable, right? So it's sort of, but we also store our gear there. We rehearse there, right? So we manage to use it as a hub for everything we do.
Yeah.
So how can you put a price on my time and the time there? Because essentially the album, if you don't count out the album, was free. It was just my time. But I haven't been able to earn anything else while I'm doing it. And obviously we've been paying the rent for that place. Then once you got the album finished, mastering was about just under 2 grand. I got my friend Wolsey to mix it. He did me a favor. That's going to be 3.5, 4 grand. Then the biggest price is then promoting it, really. That's where it starts kind of like the money just starts racking up. But the reason it racks up is because we've been essentially doing it for nothing. As soon as you have to start paying people to do a job for you, that's when the money goes, because we've all been doing it for nothing. It's been a kind of a labor of love. So it's a really hard one to say, because it's cheaper for us because we haven't had to rent a studio, pay for an engineer, all that sort of stuff. But on the other hand,
it sounds about in line.
Yeah.
With everything that I've heard from artists at your level, and I think you've done it a little bit cheaper because you've got the studio.
Yeah.
But you're talking anywhere from 20, 30 grand up to 100 grand to make an album as an independent band or artist with all the collaborators on it, and to make it worthwhile as the outcome worthwhile, which is a bit more than zero.
Well, and also you had to try and work out how much that is in streams.
Yeah, well, I
You
was
know,
there was Los Campesinos
yeah,
published this, didn't they? So their last album from the year before last, All Hell, was great record.
yeah.
Um, and I think they made 30 odd grand from streaming
Hmm.
at the point where they published it, which is no way break even. And eventually they might break even. So I guess I mean, last question, because you've come back onto the scene after a long break away. What is the ambition with Hardfire? You're going to take it step by step, or because it's a very different business to the one
Yeah.
you started out with?
And it is very like that, even the way you release a record is completely different. We've been sort of sitting here going, well, shouldn't we be doing something else right now? Because we were so used to doing a massive lead up to the release. And
Yeah,
then the release happens, and now it's more like you release it and then you start doing other stuff. And so that's all been quite peculiar. I think, we enjoy making music, we enjoy touring. Basically, if there's any money to be made, it's from the touring. That's getting harder because all your prices are going up.
mm,
But that is something that you see as, that I think that's where you kind of look at and go, well, and it's almost going back to the old days where the album promoted the tour, whereas for a while there, the tour promoted the album.
yeah,
Um, but it's mad. At the end of the day, you love making music, so you just do it. It's a compulsion. It's an illness, you know. and and you'll find a way somehow. Um, and if we didn't have our studio, we'd still try and that is what our debut album was, and that's what we're very proud of. Completely DIY. We made it on a laptop with three pretty rubbish mics,
yeah, yeah, yeah,
and we were lucky enough to have you know, a little space to make it in.
yeah.
But you can go and rent a church hall and record it. There's our ways.
Yeah, yeah, and
You know,
it did become a classic in its own right,
yeah.
because it had that energy about it. So, I mean, thanks for joining me.
Yeah,
I'll
thank
wrap
you.
it up by saying, I think sweating someone else's fever's got that energy. It feels like a little bit of a full circle thing,
Yeah, I hope so.
and you should be confident about it and go out there. And despite everything that people tell you about the modern world, as I've written, people still love albums.
Yeah.
They appreciate your catalog and they appreciate your new stuff and you as a band, and you've got that, and so go out and enjoy it, and all the best. Good
Thanks,
luck with it.
man. Yeah.
Thanks for joining me. Cheers.
Appreciate it. Thank you.